Hello and welcome to Speaking of Listening. I'm Arnie Buss, your simpatico communication coach. Have you ever heard, or maybe you've said, when something is clearly wrong with the other person and you say, well, honey, what's going on? What's wrong? And the answer is, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you. Now, I remember hearing this at various times, actually in all of my relationships. At one time or another, I either heard that statement or were pretty much words to that effect. Okay, clearly the other person was upset about something. And, what I wanted to do was I wanted to make it right. I wanted to repair whatever the damage had been done. Ideally, kind of own up and acknowledge any mistakes that I've made and, just try to make things right. And of course, my logical left brain said, well, if there's something wrong and I don't know what it is, and so I want to find out what it is. And so I would hear, well, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you. And I said, well, wait a minute. If I don't know and you're not going to tell me, how am I going to find out? So logically, it made no sense whatsoever. And maybe you've heard something like this, or again, words to that effect, or maybe you've said something like this. So today, I'm going to do a deep dive into what's going on here, because my experience, and this was before I learned the communication skills that I talk about a lot, like tracking and impact statements and things like that. So trying to respond from a logical place inevitably hit a brick wall. And in fact, only tended to throw gasoline on the fire of whatever the upset was about. So what's going on? Well, first of all, I want to talk about how to respond, because that's probably one of the most important things you want to do. And if you've been following me for any length of time or reading any of my posts, you will know that tracking is the best way to respond. So let's delve into that a little bit more. Communication. Okay, what is communication? Communication is one person sending a message and the other person receiving the message. One person sends a message, the other person receives a message. Now, dealing with hearing, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you, at the logical level is not communication has not occurred. Why? Because one person, the person expressing that, is clearly trying to send a message. And the person receiving it is not receiving the message unless they track. They won't receive messages as I didn't, because I was trying to think it logically and parse out the meaning of the words. And as I've expressed many times before, and has clearly been understood, so much of communication is not in the words. That's why I'm not a big fan of things like active listening, because that's all about the words, and it's not about the words here. Okay, so so communication this way hasn't happened. The reason why tracking is so effective is because it then reestablishes that communication. So how can communication be open? So now the communication coming at the person receiving this is the situation is they are not open to hearing anything. In fact, that's one part of the meta message there. If somebody says, I'm not going to tell you, what they're communicating is, okay, I'm not interested in hearing anything you have to say at this point, because I'm not interested in telling you anything because you should know. Okay, and then now as the receiver, I don't know. So what do I do? So let's try to decode what is happening here. So the first message is not in the words, but what is underneath it. What's underneath it is that something is bothering the other person. They're upset about something. They're upset about something that I have done or not have done. So I either did something that upset them, or I didn't do something which upset them. Now, what was it? I don't know. So now how can I find out? Well, the only way I can find out is through, in this moment, is with a conversation, with a dialogue. And yet by that initial salvo of, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you, they are not going to be open to anything. I would say, and if you don't believe me, think of the experiences that you've had with that. If they're anything like mine, they were, well, I don't know. And, and if you're not going to tell me, how am I supposed to know? That's not going to go anywhere. Why? Because that is actually sending the message, you're wrong to feel that way. This person's upset. They're upset about something specific. And if I say, well, I don't know, and you got to tell me, that is sending the message that you're not right for how you feel. And remember, feelings are neither right nor wrong. They just are. And so if the other person is upset, rightly or wrongly, over some thought or belief that they have, or some judgment about how I have done something heinous, none of that matters as far as the feeling goes. The feeling is always true because that's what they feel. So what is the message? What is the hidden message behind, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you? Well, the first level is, I should know. I should know. Okay, so that's a place where you can start tracking, because the way to open up a dialogue in which I'm going to be able to communicate something is only going to happen when the other person feels heard and understood and validated. And it's most important in a situation like this to validate what they're feeling and validate what their experience is. So it's something that I should know. I should know what I've done wrong. Okay, and in that moment, I don't. Okay. So rather than asking a question about, well, what did I do? What did I do wrong? What is it? Validate what is being said. Something like this, So something happened that was terribly upsetting. And what's even more upsetting is the fact that it's not being recognized and acknowledged. Okay, so that's dipping your toe into what is, what might be bothering them. And the thing is that that's a first level decoding of, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you. Because the first level is, I should know. I should know what it was. And okay, so what's the second, so what might happen? I mean, now how can somebody respond to that when, I mean, to the extent, if that is landing, and that is kind of an if, because sometimes somebody may be so upset that they're just not open to hearing anything. And if that's the case, then there's, but my experience is that if somebody is upset and expressing that upset, then they're expressing it for a reason, and they want to be heard. They want to feel validated. They want to know that I get their feelings. And just as a little side bar on that, two things to never say is, I know just how you feel, because you don't know how I feel. And I understand, and you don't understand a thing. At that point, those are two phrases that you ideally are banished from your vocabulary. If you want to know how somebody is feeling, then track them. Start by validating them. Okay, sorry, a little interruption there. Okay, so validate the fact that there's something that they're upset about, that they felt that should be understood. And okay, now as I said, that's just kind of the first level. You probably have to keep going. And this was something, so let's assume it was something that I did that was upsetting. And so there was something that happened that really hurt you and got you so upset about it. Again, now, so it's like, well, yeah, well, duh. Okay, so again, if you hear a duh, then okay, what is the meta message behind that? So you feel it's something which is obvious and should be well understood. Okay, so the thing is that you're getting, with these, you're starting to get to a yes response, not because you're trying to get a yes, but if you start to get yes responses, that's an indication that they're starting to feel heard and understood. And the more that they feel heard, I mean, you will feel the energy go down. So the thing is that the way to get information now, I mean, at some point, I still want to get the information, but in this last one, I said, so there was something that happened, and there was kind of duh. Then so you feel that it's obvious. Oh, well, yeah, I mean, what, only an idiot, and then this is where you need to be particularly attentive to the energy and the type of responses, the energy behind the responses and the type of responses. As you start getting yes responses, because you're actually connecting and validating what is going on for them, then the energy will start to come down, and it'll reach a point where they all of a sudden will be open. And how do you tell that? That is the so-called lookup of tracking. And when you're tracking somebody, when you get to the bottom, it's like when they finally feel heard, they finally feel validated down to their very toes. It's a palpable energetic release. You can sense it once you really attend to it. And what this requires a laser focus. I mean, not like an own, but I mean, it requires your 100% attention on the other person, both what they're saying and especially the kind of way that they're saying it, all of the nonverbal cues. And it requires responding from your aware, loving heart. So what does an aware, loving heart do in this situation? It sees that the other person, even though you may be feeling attacked and confused because it's like, okay, I did something, tell me what I did wrong. But that's not the point. The point is that how they're feeling, and the aware, loving heart says, if somebody is in pain, and anybody who says this is in pain, some kind of pain, if somebody is in pain, somebody that you care about, then don't you want to comfort them? Now, how do you comfort someone in a situation like this? Not by placating, not by being condescending, oh, there, oh, by validating their feelings, by putting yourself into an equal position with them, not in a one down position by, oh, I'm terrible, or a one up, or, come on, get over yourself, but a validating one. So you felt it, it should be obvious. It should have been obvious. It was something that, anybody would know about what was bothering. And at some point, there'll be an opportunity. And so how to make amends? Well, the amend, there are two levels of amends here. First, there was the thing that I did or didn't do that was the trigger for this. But really, the more important amend is the fact that I was not aware of it. And that kind of gets into what really the way that this can move the relationship forward is when I make an amend for not having recognized it. Then that is really what is going to be behind this. So my amend would be something like, I did X, Y, Z, and and it was something that I should have realized, and I didn't. And next time I will be more attentive to the impact of my behavior. Now I want to, with the subtext of all of this, the meta message is it, maybe you're when you hear, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you. You think, well, I mean, what is that? That's a crazy thing. What is it? What kind of person says that? Well, a lot of people say that, and not just women, by the way, and it's not in just so many words. So what's behind that? Well, what's behind that is that they're feeling that the lack of connection there, because if there was a connection, then I quote should, I don't like to should, but it's like it was something that a partner who was in an emotional connection, who had the kind of simpatico that we all seek, it was something that I would have recognized had I been attentive, had I been paying attention to what was going on for the other person. And so it's not crazy at all. It actually makes a lot of sense. Now, if you're someone who has said that, or in a situation where the other person has done something and you're just so frustrated and that they don't even recognize it, there's a much more effective way of getting your point across, because you can choose to come from your aware, loving part, even when the other person has done something that is totally not okay with you. And that's what I call impact statements. And the key behind those is they communicate clearly what has happened. So they begin with communicating to the other person what, what they did that triggered some kind of reaction. And then they include the impact. And then finally, the most important point is that they communicate clearly what your desired experience is without telling them what to do or how to do it, and which gives them the free will to either choose or not to choose, but not to have to react or respond to a demand. And what's under that? Let's sort of peel back the hood on that, but peel back a layer of that a little bit. Okay, so why is it being expressed that way? Well, that's the way I see it. It's an expression of frustration, and perhaps a little bit of fear of standing up, effectively setting a boundary, a limit about something that was not okay, and a feeling that the only way you could get that across was this kind of, sort of lobbing things over a wall and then putting up a wall. So I'm not going to tell you is a wall, but I'm going to sort of be lobbing, depending on, I just had, an image of Monty Python and cows flying over the castle, but that's kind of what it's like. And so this can open the door to a more intimate conversation about how, and I mean, after all of this, and after I've validated the other person's feelings and kind of figured out what was wrong, made amends for not only what I did, but for not recognizing that, and then at that point, I can say I'm always open to hearing if something, something that I did that wasn't okay. I'm always open to hearing that. What I would like is to have it be expressed in a way which communicates what that is and how it could be done better. But that conversation can't happen until communication occurs. And again, the beginning of this is there's no communication. I mean, yes, there's a message. And if you take one other thing away from this, it's understanding that it's one thing to send a message, it's another thing to have communication. So sending a message is not the same as communication. So the message that was sent here is that not only was there something that affected the other person in a highly negative way, but what was worse was the fact that it was not recognized. And this is expressed in the best way that they know how, because I believe that everybody is doing the best they can in every moment. In every moment, they're doing the best they can with what they have. And in that moment, the person who says, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you, that's the best that they can do in that moment. Why? Because they're full of frustration, and they have the double-edged hurt of not only what happened that upset them, but the fact that it wasn't recognized is to them, it's like a dagger to the relationship. It's like I thought that we had more connection. And so the fact that this was not recognized is, all of a sudden, it's like this relationship may not be everything that I had hoped it was. And that's a very painful thing. In other words, even though on the surface, it makes no logical sense. If you don't know, I'm not going to tell you. Well, if the other person doesn't know and you're not going to tell them, how are they going to know? And logically, that makes no sense. But when we decode it, it makes perfect sense. And that's not to say that it's an effective way. It's not an effective way of getting their needs met, because if the person they're expressing this to does not have the skills, if they don't have the presence, and if they especially don't know how to track, then things are likely to kind of go south. And so you might be wondering, well, how can I learn how to do this? How can I learn how to validate and listen clearly and also express my needs in a way that doesn't make the other person wrong? Well, there are at least 3 ways you can do that. Well, the first is you can get the book by myself and Lee Garland. It's called Hear, Hear, Engaging with Our Aware Loving Heart. It's available on Amazon, both in paperback, Kindle, and audio, read by my fabulous co-author, Lee Garland, an amazing voiceover person. And this is a great resource, a great reference for that. So head on over to Amazon and get that. Or a more effective, a faster way to that is you could register for a course that we're offering. It'll be happening in August. It'll be an online 6-week course called the Simpatico Connection. But if you can't wait until then, if you really want to take your communication skills to the next level, take your relationship to the next level, I'd be happy to talk with you about that. So in the link, there's going to be a link where you can register for a free 45-minute relationship rejuvenation call with me, where we can identify what kind of things are happening in your relationship that you want to make better. We can find out what is blocking you from having the relationship of your dreams, and you can come away with a crystal clear plan and idea of what to do next from that. And that is going to be in the link below. Remember, communication is the bedrock of all relationships, and lack of communication is the #1 cause of problems in relationships, at least as reported by marriage counselors and therapists. So if you want to take your relationship to the next level, I'd love to talk with you. And until next time, remember that listening is loving.